My mom used to have water gun fights with me and make up silly songs while making pancakes, but then she got a smartphone and spent all day scrolling while I ate breakfast alone. When she live-streamed my 10th birthday party instead of lighting my candles, and I had to buy my own frozen cupcakes with $41.83 from my piggy bank, I decided to show her what it felt like. At her huge work presentation for Bring Your Child to Work Day, I brought my old iPad and gave her the same vacant stares and in-a-minute responses she'd been giving me for months. My mom used to have water gun fights with me and make up silly songs while making pancakes. Then she got a smartphone and learned about Instagram and did a 180 overnight. All of a sudden she was scrolling reels every morning and spending all day sending her friends exercise extra fries memes. She'd sit at breakfast with her coffee getting cold, double tapping photos while I ate cereal alone. Then it spread to dinner, car rides, my school concerts. She'd hold her phone up to record, but I could see she was actually checking notifications behind the camera app. The worst part? She'd post these elaborate captions about being a blessed mama and cherishing every moment, while literally ignoring me sitting right next to her. Christmas morning she filmed me opening presents but missed my actual reaction to the art set I'd begged for because someone commented on her story. She'd promise things without looking up from the screen. Sure, honey, we'll bake cookies. Definitely, we'll go to the park. Never happened. Not once. I started keeping track in my diary. 23 broken promises in January alone. My 10th birthday was in 3 weeks and mom had been promising this elaborate princess party since November. We'll have a chocolate fountain and I'll make my famous unicorn cake. Every few days she'd mention another detail she was planning. I was more excited than I had been in months. Every day I'd come home and hug her because I was so happy at how awesome my party would be. But I started noticing something. She never actually did anything. No supplies appeared, no RSVPs came in, no cake pans came out of storage. The day before my party, I came home from school to absolutely nothing. No decorations, no cake ordered, not even birthday plates. That night I emptied my piggy bank, $41.83. I walked to the corner store alone and bought frozen cupcakes, paper plates, and streamers that were actually for New Year's but were on clearance. Stayed up past midnight making gift bags from brown paper lunch sacks I decorated with markers. The party itself was the breaking point. Mom live-streamed herself setting up while friends actually helped me. When it came time for cake, Mom literally stood there, scrolling while everyone waited for her to light the candles. Mrs. Jenkins from next door finally grabbed the lighter. I blew out my candles while Mom posted about making my baby's dreams come true. She never even saw me close my eyes to make my wish. My best friend Chloe leaned over and whispered, "Your mom didn't even watch." That's when something inside me just switched. That night, while Mom was doing her skincare routine and watching TikToks, I found my old iPad in the hall closet, the one from when I was 7. Still worked. I spent the weekend researching, the same way someone might research for a school project. I studied Mom's phone habits like a scientist, the way she'd say, "just 1 second," but mean 20 minutes. The vacant smile while scrolling, the without listening. I downloaded Roblox, Minecraft, YouTube Kids, created my own Instagram account. I practiced her phrases in the mirror. In a minute, after this video, I'm literally listening right now. The target? Mom's huge work presentation in 2 weeks. It was Bring Your Child to Work Day and I was supposed to be her special assistant. She'd been telling her boss about it for months, posting about how I was going to help her demonstrate their new family-friendly policies. I started slow. That first Monday, I brought the iPad to breakfast. "What you doing, sweetie?" Mom asked, not looking up from her own phone. "Just playing a game," I said, using her exact tone. By Wednesday, I was bringing it to dinner. "Emma, can you help set the table?" "In a minute," I mumbled, eyes glued to the screen. She didn't even notice the irony. By Friday, I had the iPad propped up while brushing my teeth while doing homework while she tried to talk to me about her presentation. "Emma, this is important. I need you to practice this part with me." I said, frantically tapping at some game. "I'm listening." The morning of work day arrived like a storm. Mom was in full panic mode by 6 a.m. Emma, get up. We need to leave in an hour." I was already awake, had been for an hour, grinding on Minecraft. "5 more minutes," I called out. She came back 10 minutes later. "Emma, seriously, get dressed. After this level, there's no time for games right now. This is important," I said, her favorite phrase. "I'm almost done." By 6:45, she was losing it. I sat at the kitchen table in my pajamas, iPad in hand, while she frantically tried to make me toast. "Emma, put the iPad down now." I glanced up for half a second, then back down. "Just gotta finish this." She yanked the iPad from my hands. "This is super important to me. Can you please get off your screen and look at me?" That's when I looked up, really looked at her, made direct eye contact for the first time in months. That's when her face dropped. It's like she finally realized it. Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find words, but nothing came out. She stood there frozen for maybe 3 seconds before the kitchen clock caught her eye, and she went right back into panic mode. She grabbed her laptop bag and started shoving papers into it while telling me we had to leave right now. This instant. No more games. I kept scrolling through Minecraft, mumbling about needing just 1 more minute while she ran around the kitchen grabbing her coffee mug and car keys. She actually tried to pull the iPad from my hands, but I held on tight and said I was almost done with this level. Her face went red and she started yelling about how this presentation could cost her the job she'd had for 8 years. I gave her the same blank look and vacant she'd given me every single day for months. She grabbed my arm and basically dragged me to the car while I kept my eyes glued to the screen. The whole ride was weird and quiet, except for her heavy breathing and the sound of her fingers drumming on the steering wheel. Every red light she'd turn to look at me still playing, and I could see her mouth moving like she wanted to say something but couldn't figure out what. At one point she actually begged me to put it down, said this presentation would decide if she kept her job or not. I just mumbled, without looking up, the exact same way she'd done when I tried to tell her about winning the spelling bee. We pulled into the parking garage at 7:43 according to the dashboard clock, and she practically ran to the elevator while I shuffled behind, still tapping at the screen. The lobby was full of people in suits and other kids dressed up nice for Bring Your Child to Work Day. Mr. Patterson was standing by the security desk with 2 other people in expensive-looking clothes. He saw us and walked over with this huge smile, stuck out his hand for me to shake. I barely glanced up from Minecraft, gave him this tiny wave with my free hand, then went back to building my castle. Mom's hand was shaking so bad she could barely sign us in at the security desk. The guard had to ask her twice to print her name clearly. We got our visitor badges and took the elevator up to the 20th floor where the big conference room was already filling up with employees and their kids. Some kids were helping their parents set up presentations while others sat quietly in chairs stairs along the wall. Mom rushed to connect her laptop to the projector while asking me over and over to help hold her charts when she pointed to them. I'd found a bench by the window and had my earbuds in watching some YouTube Kids video about slime. Other parents kept looking over at us and I could see them whispering to each other. Mom's presentation was supposed to start at 8:15 sharp and she spent the whole 15 minutes before trying to get my attention, tapping my shoulder, even trying to take one earbud out. I just kept pulling away and staring at the screen. When it was time to start, she stood at the front of the room talking about work-life balance and how their company was leading the way in family-friendly policies. Her voice sounded weird and high-pitched. When she got to the part about the new childcare app, she called me up to help demonstrate it. I shuffled forward super slow, still watching my video, barely looking where I was going. She kept saying my name louder and louder until finally she just screamed it. The whole room went dead quiet. That's when she completely lost it and shouted at me to put the iPad down, her face all red and her professional voice completely gone. Everyone in the room gasped and some kids actually looked scared. I finally looked up and stared right at her. Then I said it all. How she never put her phone down for my school play. How she missed my birthday candles. How she was on Instagram when I was crying about grandma dying. Mr. Patterson's face changed from confused to really worried. Mom tried to keep going with her presentation, her voice all shaky, clicking to the next slide about company values. But I wasn't done telling everyone how she live-streamed my birthday instead of actually being there. How she missed my art award because someone commented on her post. How she made 23 promises in January that she never kept. The other parents looked horrified and some were covering their kids' ears. Mom's face just crumbled and she started crying right there in front of everyone. Mr. Patterson stood up and suggested maybe we should take a break, his voice really gentle like he was talking to someone who might break. In the hallway, Mom slumped against the wall, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe right. For the first time in forever, she wasn't reaching for her phone to post about it or check her notifications. She kept trying to say she didn't realize, she didn't know, but the words came out all broken and mixed with crying. I'm really curious about what made Emma suddenly snap at her birthday party when Mrs. Jenkins had to light the candles. Was that specific moment different from all the other times her mom ignored her? I went to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall, the iPad finally dark in my lap. I could hear Mom come in and go into the stall next to mine, still crying. We both just sat there not saying anything, just crying on opposite sides of the metal wall. My anger was mixing with this awful feeling in my stomach, like maybe I'd gone too far even though she deserved to know how it felt. After what felt like forever, Mr. Patterson knocked on the bathroom door and said he'd wait for us in the break room. Mom and I came out at the same time, both with red puffy eyes, and followed him down the hall. He had this sad look on his face when he told Mom she should take me home and they could reschedule her presentation for another time. Mom just nodded without saying anything. As we walked past the conference room, I heard Mr. Patterson telling another person in a suit that they might need to rethink the whole family-friendly campaign if this is what was really happening to their employees' families. The walk to the parking garage felt like it took forever with nobody saying anything and Mom's heels clicking on the concrete floor. She fumbled with her keys 3 times before getting the car door open, and I climbed into the back seat instead of sitting up front like I usually did. The whole ride home, Mom kept gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white, and I noticed her purse sitting closed on the passenger seat with her phone still inside. She started to say something when we stopped at a red light, but the words just hung there in the air before dying. Then she tried again at the next light but only got out my name before going quiet. I stared out the window watching houses go by and feeling this weird emptiness where I thought winning would feel different. When we pulled into our driveway, Mom sat there for a whole minute with the engine still running before finally turning it off. Inside the house, she went straight to the kitchen phone and called the school secretary to say I wouldn't be coming back today because of a family emergency. Then she sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where she'd scrolled through her phone during hundreds of breakfasts, and pulled her phone out of her purse. My whole body tensed up, but then she held down the power button until the screen went black and set it face down on the table. She looked at me for real for the first time in months and asked me to please talk to her because she was actually listening now. Everything I'd been holding inside came rushing out like when you shake up a soda and open it too fast. I told her about every single promise she broke and how I counted them in my diary and how Mrs. Jenkins had to light my birthday candles because she was too busy posting. I told her about the $41.83 from my piggy bank and walking to the corner store alone to buy frozen cupcakes. Mom's face went from confused to shocked to something that looked like she might throw up. She kept shaking her head and then suddenly gasped about the frozen cupcakes and how I bought my own birthday cake. She grabbed an actual notebook from the junk drawer and started writing down everything I was saying with her hand shaking. When I said 23 broken promises in January, she repeated it back in this hollow voice and said she thought she was being a good mom because she posted about me every day. I told her posting about me wasn't the same as actually seeing me, and she just stared at the notebook like the words were in another language. We ate lunch in total silence with Mom making peanut butter sandwiches while I sat at the counter watching her hands shake a little bit. No phones or tablets or anything, just the sound of us chewing and the clock ticking on the wall. Every few minutes, Mom would glance at her purse where her phone was, and her fingers would twitch like she needed to check something, but she'd catch herself and look away. Around 2 o'clock, she went to the living room and picked up the dusty landline phone we hadn't used since I was in 2nd grade. She dialed Dad's number from memory, and when he answered, her voice cracked as she asked him to come pick me up. I could hear Dad's confused voice through the phone asking what was wrong, and Mom said nothing was wrong, but also everything was wrong, and she needed to figure some things out. Then her voice got really small, and she said she'd been a terrible mother, and I'd showed her that today in front of everyone. While we waited for Dad, Mom pulled out her phone again, but this time to show me her Instagram account. She had 47,000 followers, and her bio said, "Blessed Mama living my best life," with a bunch of heart emojis. The last post from this morning showed a selfie of us in the car with a caption about taking her angel to work and hashtag mommy-daughter goals. All the comments were people saying she was such an inspiration and what an amazing mom she was, and it made my stomach hurt looking at them. When Dad's car pulled up outside, Mom went to meet him at the door, and they talked in low voices while I went upstairs to pack a bag. I could hear pieces of their conversation floating up the stairs with words like intervention and addiction, and lost her completely. Dad's voice stayed gentle but firm when he said I'd been telling him for months, but she just wasn't listening. In Dad's car, he didn't start driving right away, but turned around to look at me in the backseat. He said what I did was brave but also cruel, and that that public humiliation wasn't how we solve problems, even if mom needed to see it. That's when I started crying, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry ones that burned my cheeks. I told him I tried everything else, absolutely everything, and nothing worked until today. Dad's apartment was smaller than our house with just 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, but it felt warmer somehow. At dinner that night, there were no tablets or phones anywhere because Dad had always had that rule even before the divorce. While we ate spaghetti, he mentioned carefully that mom had called him last week about her presentation and how proud she was that I'd be there with her. He said he thought she really believed she was balancing everything well and being a good mom. After we finished eating and I was clearing my plate, Dad pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something. He turned the screen toward me and there was mom's Facebook page with a new post from just an hour ago. The words were right there in black and white about how she'd been living life through a screen and missed me growing up and was taking a break from social media. Already 200 people had commented with hearts and crying faces and messages about how brave she was. Dad closed the phone and said she was at least acknowledging it. Later that night around 8 when I was getting ready for bed, Dad came and sat on the edge of my mattress. He told me mom loved me but got lost the way adults sometimes do when they get caught up in things that feel good in the moment and forget what really matters. When I asked if she'd change, he was honest and said he didn't know, but that I'd opened her eyes today. I couldn't sleep that night and kept staring at the ceiling, replaying mom's face when she realized what I was doing at her presentation, the way her professional mask cracked right there in front of everyone, and how Mr. Patterson had looked at her with this mixture of shock and disappointment. My stomach felt sick thinking maybe I went too far and ruined her whole career along with making my point. The next morning, Dad was up early making real pancakes from scratch with flour and eggs and everything, not the frozen kind we usually had. His phone was charging in the other room where he couldn't even see it. While he flipped pancakes, he mentioned mom had texted him on the actual phone app, not through Instagram or Facebook, asking if I was okay. I didn't know how to answer that question because was I okay? Around 9, the landline rang, and it was Mrs. Jenkins calling to tell me that mom had come by her house yesterday evening, looking like a complete mess. Mom had been asking about all the times Mrs. Jenkins had watched me after school, and apparently had no idea how often I'd been going over there when she was too busy scrolling. Mrs. Jenkins said mom was finally seeing what she'd missed, and that it was because of me. Monday morning came, and Dad drove me to school, but apparently the story had already spread everywhere. Chloe ran up to me the second I got out of the car and whispered that everyone was talking about what happened because her mom had been at mom's presentation. She said her mom told her that mom had a total breakdown right there in the conference room. Ms. Rodriguez pulled me aside before class started and said if I needed to talk about anything, she was there for me. The weight of what I'd done was starting to feel real and heavy. After school, mom's car wasn't in the pickup line like it sometimes used to be. Dad's car was there instead, and when I got in, he explained that mom wanted to come but thought maybe I wouldn't want to see her yet. There was a box in the back seat with all my good art supplies from home, the expensive ones mom had bought me for Christmas but never actually saw me use. A note was attached that said she wanted to see what I create when I was ready, and it was signed just mom. 2 days later on Wednesday, mom texted Dad asking if she could see me. Not a Facebook message or Instagram DM, but an actual text message on his regular phone. Dad let me decide what I wanted to do, and I agreed to Friday after school, but told him to tell her no phones allowed. If she brought her phone, I would leave immediately. Dad passed along my message, and mom agreed right away without arguing. At Dad's apartment, I started working on a painting of myself where half my face was replaced by a glowing screen. Talk about instant karma hitting harder than a blue shell in Mario Kart. Watching mom discover she'd racked up more broken promises than Instagram followers, while her daughter literally bought her own birthday cake, is the kind of plot twist that makes soap operas jealous. Dad didn't say anything about it, just brought me apple juice and crackers while I painted. He mentioned quietly that mom had sent him her Instagram stats showing she'd lost 10,000 followers since she stopped posting. He said she claimed not to care, but he knew it was killing her inside. A week after the presentation, Mr. Patterson called Dad's phone and asked to speak with me directly. He told me my bravery in speaking up had started important conversations at their whole company about work-life balance and family time. They were making new rules about mandatory phone-free family time for all employees. He said mom's presentation might not have gone as planned, but it ended up being the most important one they'd ever had. Friday after school, Dad dropped me off at the coffee shop where mom wanted to meet, and I almost didn't recognize her sitting in the corner booth. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun instead of those perfect curls she spent an hour on every morning, and she wasn't wearing any makeup at all. She had on just regular jeans and an old college sweatshirt instead of her usual Instagram-ready outfits, and she was literally sitting on her hands like she didn't trust them. When she saw me, she stood up too fast and knocked over the salt shaker, and her voice came out all rusty when she said hi baby, and I said hi back, but the space between us felt like the Grand Canyon. We went to the park where she used to push me on the swings back before she got her first smartphone and sat on the bench watching some little kids play. She told me she'd been going to meetings for people with digital addiction, which she didn't even know was a real thing, and laughed, but it sounded hollow. She said she wasn't the only parent who'd lost their kid to a screen, except she was the one holding it. The withdrawal was real with actual physical symptoms like anxiety and insomnia, and constantly reaching for a phone that wasn't there anymore. She mentioned having 47,000 strangers validating her every day, but not being able to see her own daughter needing her, and asked how she became this person. I asked if she remembered the water gun fights and the silly pancake songs we used to make up, and her eyes filled with tears. She talked about Tuesday mornings, which we called Tuneful Tuesdays, where I'd make up lyrics about syrup, and I told her that mom disappeared when she got her iPhone and just vanished. She pulled out this ancient flip phone from her purse and showed it to me, saying it was her phone now with just calls and texts, because she couldn't trust herself with anything else yet. Her laptop had parental controls she'd put on herself, and Dad had the password, so she only got 1 hour of internet a day with him watching. 2 weeks later, I was back at mom's house for the weekend because of the court-ordered custody agreement, and everything looked different. The ring lights were gone from every corner, and the phone tripods had been donated to Goodwill, and she'd covered all the spots where they used to stand with my artwork from the past year, which were all pieces she never saw me make. Saturday morning, she made pancakes with no phone propped against the coffee maker and no live stream running, and she burned the first batch because she was actually talking to me instead of reading comments. She admitted she forgot how hard it was to do 2 things at once when you're actually present. Chloe came over for the first time in months, and her mom seemed hesitant when she dropped her off, and I overheard her telling mom that everyone was talking about what happened, and some people thought she should lose custody. Mom's response surprised me when she said maybe they were right, because she lost me long before that presentation. That night, Mom showed me a box under her bed filled with screenshots she printed of every post she made about me, and there were hundreds of pages. She said she thought she was documenting my childhood, but when you really looked, none of them had me actually in them, because it was all staged and fake, and she'd turned me into a prop for content. 3 weeks after the presentation, Mom got called into HR, but not about the disaster itself, but about her social media use during work hours. They showed her data that said she was on various platforms 6 to 7 hours a day, even during meetings, and she told Dad on speaker that she could have been fired, but they were giving her one chance because she was getting help. The help started 2 days later, when Mom drove us to this office building downtown, where Dr. Brennan worked on the 3rd floor. Mom's hands shook signing the intake forms, while I sat in the waiting room playing with a wooden bead maze meant for toddlers. Dr. Brennan came out wearing regular clothes instead of a white coat, and took Mom back first while I waited 45 minutes reading old highlights magazines. When it was my turn, she had me sit in this big leather chair and asked me to tell her about life before Mom got her phone. I talked for 20 minutes straight about water gun fights and pancake songs and bedtime stories while she took notes on a yellow pad. Then she asked about after, and I just started crying because nobody had ever asked me that directly before. She handed me tissues and said something that made my chest tight. She said what happened to me was a form of neglect, and that losing my mom to a screen was real loss. The next week, we had our first family session where Dr. Brennan made Mom listen without interrupting while I listed everything she missed. I told her about the science fair where she took selfies with other parents, while I explained my volcano project to the judges alone. About the piano recital she live-streamed, but couldn't name the song I played when Dad asked her later. About the soccer game where she cheered at the wrong times because she was watching through her phone screen instead of with her eyes. Mom sat there crying silently, and for once her phone stayed in her purse the whole hour. After 3 weeks of sessions, Mom showed me her old Instagram analytics on Dr. Brennan's laptop, and my stomach dropped. Her most active hours were between 2 and 4 in the morning every single night. She admitted she was setting alarms to wake up and post content when engagement was highest. She chose posting for strangers over sleeping and over everything else in her life, including me. At school, Ms. Rodriguez assigned us to write personal essays about a challenge we'd overcome, and I wrote about what I called digital abandonment. I turned in 6 pages about losing my mom to social media, and Ms. Rodriguez kept me after class with tears in her eyes. She asked if she could share it with Mrs. Park, the school counselor, because other kids might be going through the same thing. Mrs. Park read my essay and called Mom that same day to set up a meeting where she told us she wanted to start a support group for kids with screen-addicted parents. The first meeting was the following Tuesday in the library after school, and I thought maybe 2 kids would show up. 7 kids came through that door and sat in our circle of chairs looking nervous and relieved at the same time. Marcus was in 6th grade and told us his dad missed his baby brother being born because he was live tweeting from the hospital hallway to his followers. Lily's mom forgot to pick her up from dance class 3 times because she was making TikToks in the car. Tyler's dad watched football highlights during his grandmother's funeral. We all had different stories, but the same hurt, and Mrs. Park just let us talk without trying to fix anything. After our 4th meeting, Mom asked if she could come to one, and the group had to vote on whether parents should be allowed. Marcus voted no because his dad would never care enough to show up, but Lily thought it might help if our parents could see all of us together. The vote was 4 to 3 in favor, so Mom came to our next meeting and sat in our circle looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Each kid told their story again, and Marcus showed a video his aunt took at his baseball game, where his dad held up his phone the whole time and missed Marcus hitting his first home run. His dad was streaming to 12 people who didn't even know Marcus existed, while his son achieved something he'd dreamed about for years. Mom completely broke down sobbing so hard that Mrs. Park had to get her water from the fountain in the hall. Between gasps, Mom said they thought they were connecting with the world, but really they disconnected from their own children. Dr. Brennan suggested at our next session that Mom write apology letters by hand for every single moment I could remember her missing because of her phone. It took her 3 weeks to write 47 letters, and she made me read each one out loud during our sessions. January 15th. You asked me to read you a story, and I said after this post but never came to your room. March 3rd, you showed me your art project, and I said wow, while looking at my screen, and you asked me what part I liked, and I couldn't answer. Letter after letter of specific moments she missed and what she was doing online instead of being present with me. We started having analog Saturdays where neither of us could use any screens from sunrise to sunset. That first Saturday was so awkward we barely talked because we didn't know how to be together without devices as buffers between us. I pulled out the Monopoly game from the hall closet, and dust flew everywhere when I opened it. We played for 4 hours straight and actually finished the whole game with me winning by 3 hotels. Mom started doing puzzles and reading actual books and baking from recipes written on index cards instead of her phone screen. 2 months after the presentation disaster, Mom's boss, Mr. Patterson, called her into his office, but not to fire her like she expected. He told her she'd produced more quality work in the past 8 weeks than in the entire previous year and wanted to promote her to senior account manager. The timing of Mom's promotion feels oddly convenient. She's been the least productive employee for ages with all that phone time, then suddenly becomes their star worker. This whole recovery seems awfully smooth for someone who was literally setting alarms at 2 a.m. just to post content and couldn't even remember what song I played at my recital. Mom came home and told me she'd lost all her Instagram friends and her influencer status and the identity she'd built online for 3 years. Then she hugged me and said she didn't lose me though, and that she actually found me for the first time in years. 2 weeks later, Aunt Rachel came for lunch, and the second she walked in, she pulled out her phone to get a photo of the food Mom had made. Mom grabbed the phone right out of her hand and put it in a drawer. Aunt Rachel's mouth dropped open like Mom had slapped her. She kept reaching for her pocket where her phone usually was, and her hands were actually shaking a little. Mom didn't give it back until she left 3 hours later. The support group at school got bigger every week, and soon we had 12 kids meeting in the library. The school sent home a letter about something called digital wellness, and some parents got really mad saying the school shouldn't tell them how to parent. Mom went to the PTA meeting and stood up in front of everyone and talked about how she'd missed years of my childhood for hearts from strangers. I could see some parents looking at their phones while she was talking. That weekend, I was looking for my old art supplies in the hall closet when I found Mom's old phone shoved behind some boxes. My hands got all sweaty when I turned it on. The screen lit up with 1,847 notifications. Message after message message from her followers asking where she'd gone and was everything okay, and they missed her content. Not one single message asked about me, even though she'd posted about me every day. They never saw me at all. 10 weeks after the presentation, Dad and Mom met with lawyers about custody stuff. I sat in the waiting room doing homework while they talked for 2 hours. When they came out, Mom's eyes were red, but she was nodding. She told me later she wasn't fighting Dad's request because she needed to earn the right to be my full-time mom again. The custody hearing was the scariest day of my life. The judge wanted to talk to me alone in her office, which had all these law books and a picture of her kids on the desk. She asked if I felt safe with Mom, and I told her I felt safer now because before I was alone even when Mom was there, but now when she's there, she's actually there. The judge wrote a lot of notes. When we went back to the courtroom, the judge said Mom could have weekends if she kept going to therapy and stayed off social media. She had to send proof to the court every month. She called it a unique form of neglect, but neglect nonetheless. Mom just nodded and didn't argue. The next weekend, Mom picked me up and we spent the whole time taking down all the fake Instagram stuff in the house. We pulled down the neon signs and the fake plants and those ring lights she had in every room. We put up my drawings from kindergarten and real photos from before she got her phone and bought real plants that needed water every day. Mrs. Jenkins came over and said it looked like people actually lived there now. 3 months after the presentation, Mom's flip phone died completely. At the phone store, she stood there sweating while the guy showed her all the new iPhones. Her hands were shaking and she kept wiping them on her jeans. She asked for the most basic phone 3 times before he understood she meant actually basic, not just the cheapest smartphone. That Thursday at support group, Marcus's dad showed up because Mom had talked him into coming. He walked in with his phone out taking a picture of the circle and Marcus got up and walked right out. His dad stood there for a second, then went to his car and left his phone and came back. Marcus let him sit down but didn't look at him the whole meeting. 3 nights later, I woke up at 2 a.m. to get water and saw light coming from under Mom's door. I pushed it open and found her on Dad's tablet scrolling through her old Instagram. She wasn't posting anything, just looking at all her old posts and crying. She said she missed feeling important and seen. I told her it was all fake and she nodded and said she knew, but fake felt better than facing what she'd become. I sat there on her bed and watched her scroll through years of posts while tears ran down her face. The next morning, Dr. Brennan called an emergency session and told us Mom had relapsed just like any other addict would. She said the brain doesn't care if it's drugs or likes. Addiction is addiction, and Mom needed twice weekly sessions now instead of once. Mom had to throw away her 37-day chip and start over at day 1. 4 months after the work presentation disaster, our school announced this digital wellness night that nobody expected to be a big deal, but the auditorium filled up so fast they had to move chairs from the cafeteria. Mom stood at the podium shaking while she told everyone she'd had 47,000 followers, but didn't know my favorite color was purple until last week when she finally asked. I watched from my seat as parents in the audience started putting their phones away. She showed them screenshots of her old posts next to her therapy journal, where she'd written down all the moments she missed. The page about my first sentence made her voice crack because apparently I used to say, "Mommy, look at me," about 50 times a day until I just stopped trying. After the presentation, Chloe's mom found us in the parking lot and apologized for judging Mom all those months, admitting she'd posted through Chloe's whole birthday party instead of actually watching her blow out the candles. They started meeting every Tuesday at our house with coffee and notebooks, and within 3 weeks, 12 other moms were showing up. 5 months after the presentation, Mom got this thick envelope from some law firm saying 3 of her mommy blogger friends were suing her for lost income from their joint sponsored posts and affiliate links. Mom actually laughed when she read it out loud to Dad, saying she chose me over money she was making by exploiting me. The lawsuit disappeared 2 weeks later when Mom's lawyer sent them thousands of screenshots showing our address, my school name, and pictures of me in my bedroom that anyone could have used to find us. Mom went white when the lawyer explained how dangerous it had been. For my 11th birthday, Mom put a basket by the door with a sign saying phones went in or guests stayed out, and 3 families turned around and left, but the kids who stayed actually played pin the tail on the donkey and musical chairs like it was 1995. One kid said it felt weird but good weird while we ate cake with our hands instead of posing with it. Mom wrote one last post through Dad's account that he uploaded for her, telling her followers she'd missed my childhood for their validation, and they shouldn't miss their kids' childhoods for hers. Dad said it went viral, but Mom never looked because she didn't have any way to check even if she wanted to. 6 months after everything started, we sat in the same courtroom where this mess began, and I told the judge I wanted to split time equally between my parents because Mom could actually see me now. The judge looked through 6 months of therapy records, 12 support group sign-in sheets, and Mom's basic flip phone that couldn't even take pictures. She said Mom got a second chance because I gave her the gift of truth, then laid out all these conditions about continuing therapy and monthly check-ins and keeping the digital boundaries. Mom promised she would follow every single rule. The first few weeks of moving between houses felt weird, but I got used to packing my backpack every Wednesday and Sunday. Mom's house had this old phone on the wall that actually had a cord, and Dad's place had my tablet, but only for an hour after homework. I'd sit at Mom's kitchen table doing math problems while she cooked real dinners again, and we'd talk about school stuff without any screens around. At Dad's apartment, I noticed he started putting his phone in a drawer during dinner too. The support group met every Tuesday, and there was this kid Marcus whose dad wouldn't even try therapy because his gaming clan needed him for raids every night. Ms. Rodriguez found me after class one day holding this paper about a national essay contest for kids, and she'd already filled out most of the forms. She said my essay about what happened with Mom was exactly what they were looking for, and asked if she could send it in. 3 weeks later, the letter came saying I won second place, and they wanted Mom and me to come to this big ceremony in Washington to speak about our story. Mom's hands shook when she read the invitation, and she kept saying she didn't know if she could talk in front of people without hiding behind a screen. We practiced her speech at the kitchen table for weeks, with me pretending to be the audience while she stood by the stove reading from index cards. The ceremony was in this huge hotel ballroom with hundreds of people, and when they called Mom up to speak, she left her cards on the table and just talked from her heart. She told everyone how she got addicted to likes and comments while her real daughter disappeared, and how I saved her by showing her the truth in the worst way possible. People were crying and clapping, and afterward, this woman in a suit came up saying she worked for a publisher who wanted us to write a book together. Mom started to say no because it felt like using me for content again, but I grabbed her hand and told her other kids needed to hear this story. We agreed to write it, but all the money would go to programs that help families with tech addiction. Every Saturday morning, we'd sit at the kitchen table table with notebooks and pens writing our chapters by hand before typing them up later. I asked Mom if she remembered wanting to be a writer before Instagram, and she nodded while tears dropped onto her notebook pages. Marcus came to group 1 week with his eyes all red because his parents were getting divorced since his dad picked his online friends over real therapy. Phone baskets at birthday parties hitting harder than reality checks. Watching families literally turn around and leave because they can't put their devices down for cake tells you everything about where we've landed as a society. He kept saying at least my mom chose me over strangers on the internet, even if it took getting humiliated at work to wake her up. 6 months later, Mom had to go to the state capitol to talk to lawmakers about kids and social media, and she brought boxes of printed screenshots from her old Instagram. She showed them thousands of photos of me with our address visible and personal information that anyone could see, and told them parents shouldn't be allowed to exploit their kids for content. Some of Mom's old Instagram friends started posting nasty things about her being a traitor to the mommy blogger community, and Dad had to monitor it so Mom wouldn't see. Kids at school showed me the posts on their phones calling Mom fake and horrible and saying she was just doing this for attention now. I told them she was a bad mom before, but she's trying to be better, and that's what matters. One afternoon, Mom was cleaning the garage and found her old ring light in a box and just started shaking and crying on the floor. She told Dr. Brennan at our next session that she wanted to set it up and make just one post to say sorry to everyone. When the 1-year mark came around, Mom took the whole day off work, and we went back to the same office building where everything happened. She stood in the lobby looking up at the floors above and told me losing her promotion was worth finding me again. Mr. Patterson spotted us from the elevator and waved us up to his office where he had this framed photo on his desk of his own kids without any phones in sight. He pulled out a laptop and turned it toward us, and there was Mom's disaster presentation playing on the screen with a title card that said, "The Wake Up Call, a mandatory training video." Mr. Patterson explained how they'd made it required viewing for every employee with kids, and how the company had started phone-free family hours because of what happened that day. Mom's hands were shaking as she watched herself on screen having her breakdown, but Mr. Patterson kept talking about how it changed their whole company culture. He called in some of the people who'd been in that conference room that day, and Mom stood up and apologized to each one, telling them she was sorry they had to see that, but grateful they did because public shame saved her relationship with me. A few of them admitted they went home and put their phones away after seeing what happened to us. That night, we had our 1-year celebration at home with Dad coming over too, and we played board games and made pizzas from scratch and told stories without anyone taking a single photo. Mom kept saying we didn't need to document it because we were actually living it. A few weeks later, we finished our book manuscript, and the publisher called wanting us to do this huge social media campaign to promote it. Mom actually laughed on the phone and told them she'd do radio, print, TV, even carrier pigeon, but no social media because that was the whole point of the book. They didn't understand at first and kept pushing, but Mom wouldn't budge. 2 months after that, 14 months after the presentation disaster, the book came out and Mom started doing interviews on morning shows, where hosts would always ask how she stayed connected without social media. She'd tell them she connected with her daughter, her family, her real friends in person, and they'd look at her like she was speaking another language. The book signing at our local bookstore was packed with kids dragging their phone-absorbed parents and parents coming alone looking desperate for help. Mom signed each book with the same message about looking up because their kids were waiting for them. One mom broke down crying right there at the signing table, showing Mom her screen time of 14 hours a day and begging for help. That's when Mom decided to start a local chapter of Digital Detox Parents with no online presence at all, just in-person meetings only. 20 parents showed up to the first meeting and Mom made them stack their phones in a box, which caused several to actually leave when they realized it was a phone-free hour, but 15 stayed. My 12th birthday came around and Mom threw another analog party, and this time none of the parents complained about the no-phone rule. One dad actually thanked her, telling us how he'd had his first real conversation with his kid on the drive home from my last party, and found out his son hated baseball after forcing him to play for 3 years. 6 months later, 18 months after the presentation, we were sitting in Dr. Brennan's office, and she was telling Mom she'd made more progress than any digital addiction patient she'd ever treated. She said most people couldn't fully disconnect, but Mom had done it even though it cost her a career, friends, and her whole identity, but she chose me instead. Mom just said she chose real life. That's when the phone call came that changed everything again. A tech company wanted to hire Mom as their director of digital wellness, specifically because she understood the real cost of screen addiction from living through it. They wanted her to teach their employees how to disconnect, how to be present with their families. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Mom going to work at a tech company to teach people to put down their tech. She accepted the job. Her first day came 3 weeks later, and I went with her to the office, this huge glass building downtown, where everyone wore jeans and carried laptops everywhere. Mom stood in front of about 50 employees in this big conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and started talking without any notes or phone in her hand. She told them she was a recovering digital addict who lost her daughter to a screen, the one in her own hand, but that I saved her by showing her exactly what she'd become. Then she pulled up the disaster presentation video on the big screen behind her, the one where I ruined everything at her old job, and people actually gasped when they saw how bad it was. Mom didn't flinch though, just said this was what woke her up and asked if they wanted to wake up together too. People started nodding and some were even crying a little. 2 months later, we were back in court for the final custody hearing, and the judge shuffled through all these papers while Mom and Dad sat at different tables with their lawyers. The judge looked up and said Mom had shown remarkable commitment to recovery, and that I'd shown remarkable courage and forgiveness, then signed something that removed all the custody restrictions completely. Mom and Dad talked quietly with the lawyers for a few minutes, and then Mom turned to me and said we were keeping the current schedule anyway, because structure helped with recovery and with everything really. The support group at school kept growing and growing until the principal called a district meeting about it. They decided to implement the program at all 23 elementary schools in Columbus, and asked me to help train the peer counselors. Marcus, this kid whose parents were both phone addicts, became one of the best counselors, and told me one day after a session that I gave him hope that parents could change, that even if his didn't, mine proved it was possible. Mom and I started doing all these new things together without any cameras or posts about them. Saturday mornings we'd make pancakes and sing the silly songs she used to make up when I was little, and Wednesday nights we'd play board games until way too late, and Sunday afternoons we'd do crafts that got glitter everywhere but we never took pictures of them. them. One afternoon, Mom was helping me clean my closet, and I found my old iPad shoved behind some stuffed animals, the one I'd used to mirror her behavior during that awful week. The screen was completely dead and black. I could have charged it, but I just handed it to Mom, and she put it in the electronics recycling bag without saying anything. Neither of us needed to talk about how that girl who hurt her mom to be seen didn't live here anymore, or how the mom who needed strangers to validate her didn't either. Mrs. Jenkins started coming for dinner every Thursday, and one night she was helping clear the table when she told us we'd come so far. Mom's eyes got all watery, and she said she almost lost me completely to a stupid phone, to hearts and likes from people who didn't even know my middle name. I said it's Grace, and Mom smiled and said she knew that now. About a year after everything happened, Dad called to say one of Mom's old Instagram friends had reached out to him because her own daughter wouldn't talk to her anymore, and wanted to know how Mom fixed things. Mom wrote her back saying I fixed it by breaking her publicly, and she just had to be broken enough to change. A few weeks after that, Dad and I were driving home from soccer practice, and he told me he was proud of me. He said what I did took courage and cruelty, but sometimes those go together when someone you love is lost. When I asked if he thought I went too far, he just looked at me in the rearview mirror and said I went exactly as far as I needed to go. Just look at where we both were now. Mom started keeping a real journal with an actual pen and paper, writing in it every night before bed. One night, she showed me an entry from day 547 without social media, where she wrote about how I laughed at her joke that day. Real laughter not performed for a camera, and how she was there for it, present for it, saw my actual joy. And that was worth more than 1,000,000 likes ever could be. Tonight, Mom came into my room to tuck me in, something she hadn't done since I was 7, back before she got her first smartphone. She pulled the covers up to my chin and kissed my forehead and said, "I love you, Emma." I said I love you too, Mom. She turned off my light, and I heard her walk down the hall to her room, heard her door close, heard her getting ready for bed. No phone glow under her door. No notification sounds breaking the quiet. No scrolling sounds from her bed. Just quiet. Just peace. Just us, finally. Thanks for having me along for the ride today. Definitely made for an interesting hang. Catch you later. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.